Let's talk about simple, compound, and complex sentences. But before I talk to you about what they are, I need to be clear about two things: sentences and clauses. A sentence, we understand it as something starting with a capital letter and ending with a full stop or a question mark or an exclamation. That's your sentence, to simplify. A clause is like a sentence. However, it's not exactly like a sentence, in that sometimes when you read a sentence you feel like, well, we've got two sentences within one sentence. Well, these smaller sentences are the clauses. Now, clauses have a subject and a verb, although the subject may be implied. A clause could just be one word. So a sentence could just have one word, which have just one clause, like listen. When I say listen, I've got only one verb, but the subject in there is implied. But when I say listen, I mean you listen. So the subject will be you, but we don't need you in there. I could just say listen. Now, what do I mean by subject and verb? The subject is often described as the doer of the action being the verb. So subject does the action, the verb. However, the verb is not always an action verb. It does not always imply action. When I say the athletes are tired, or the athletes look tired, or the athletes appear tired, well, even though they are athletes, they're not doing any action when you say they are tired. You are just stating they are tired. So, are, look, appear in that sentence is what we call state of being verbs. The state of being verbs are verbs that tells you the subject equals what goes after the verb. So the subject, the athletes, equal tired. It's like they are the same. But then when you have something, again, you don't do any action. So when I say the house has a conservatory, or the house possesses a conservatory, the house is not doing any actions whatsoever in relation to the conservatory. However, have and possess are also verbs. So it's quite a bit difficult to define what a verb is. Quite often, the verb is an action. But verbs like are, look, appear, they are state of being, it's not an action. Have and possess, just possession, not an action, but they are still verbs. You may identify the subject by asking the question who or what. So, in my sentence, the athletes are tired, I could ask this question, who are tired? And the answer is the athletes. So the athletes is the subject of are tired. In relation to the house as a conservatory, what as a conservatory could be my question. What as a conservatory? The answer is the house. So the house is the subject. The subject and the verb are linked because they have to agree. What I mean by that is, it is a mistake to say I are in England. You don't say I are in England. They do not agree. I does not agree with are. The subject I does not agree with the verb are. We say I am in England. I and am agree. The subject is what tells you what form of the verb to use. Only the subject tells you if you should use am, are, is, was, or were for the verb be. If you use I, it's going to be am, or was, I am, I was. If it is there, it's going to be are or were. They are, they were, and so on and so on. In English, we usually use the order subject followed by the verb, subject plus verb. But sometimes the order is inversed, especially when asking direct questions. So, an example of subject-verb order is the cows are in the shed. The question, who are in the shed? Who are in the shed? Answer, the cows. Then the cows is the subject. The verb are. The cows are in the shed. That's a statement. Let's have a look at the question. Are the cows in the shed? Are the cows in the shed? That's a direct question. But we've got the verb first, are, followed by the subject. So the order subject-verb have been inversed with this question. Note that there are two types of verbs, the main verb and the auxiliary verb. The main verb expresses the meaning, while the auxiliary verb is used with the main verb, although sometimes the main verb is implied. In the following examples, eat is the main verb as the meaning is on it. So when I say the following examples, let's have a look at these examples. I eat vegetables. Question, who eats vegetables? Answer, I. So I is the subject of I eat vegetables. Eat is the main verb. I am eating vegetables. Here we've got two verbs. We've got am eating. Eating is still the main verb because the meaning is on eating. Whereas am does not have a meaning. Am here is only there to tell you that the action has started, but has not finished. I have eaten vegetables. Have is an auxiliary verb. Eaten is still our main verb because the meaning is still on eaten, not have. Have gives a different aspect to the verb eaten, like started in the past. The action of eating is started in the past. I could also have I have been eating vegetables. Have been are two auxiliary verbs. Eating is still our main verb. I must eat vegetables. Must is our auxiliary verb again. A different type of auxiliary verb. We call it a modal auxiliary verb or just modal. We've got 9 modal verbs in English. Must is one of them. The others are can, could, shall, should, will, would, may, might. An example with another modal verb. I may eat vegetables. May, my modal verb, eat, my main verb. And last, I do eat vegetables. Do here is an auxiliary verb and eat the main verb because again, the meaning is on eat, not on do. When I say I do eat vegetables, do gives me a different aspect to the eating here. It's like I emphasize that I actually eat vegetables. Yes, I do eat vegetables. Note that the verbs be, have, and do are the only verbs that can be main verbs or auxiliary verbs. So these three could work as an auxiliary verb with other verbs, but they could work on their own as main verbs. Compare, for example, London is the capital of the UK, with London is listed as one of the top tourist destinations. In my first sentence, London is the capital of the UK. Is a main verb. The meaning is on is. London equals the capital of the UK. Whereas in my second example, London is listed as one of the top tourist destinations. Listed is the main verb because the meaning is on listed, not on is. Is gives a different aspect to listed here in my sentence. Now, we have complete sentences and incomplete sentences as well. The incomplete sentences are sometimes called fragment, a sentence fragment. Now, a sentence fragment, or an incomplete sentence, is a sentence that doesn't have a subject and or a verb, or there is some information missing for the sentence to make sense on its own, in that it does not have a complete thought. A complete sentence has a subject and a verb, and makes sense on its own. It has a complete thought. However, some sentences do not have a subject, but still make sense on their own because the subject is implied. So they are complete sentences. It is the case when you use the imperative, also known as the common verb, because the implied subject is you. And we had an example earlier when I said listen. Listen is in the imperative. The subject is implied. You listen. But we can drop you. Just say listen is fine. We could also say peel the potatoes. Peel is the verb here in the imperative. I could say you peel the potatoes, but once again, you is dropped. We don't need it. I could say get out of my kitchen. I give an order here. Get out of my kitchen. And when I say get out of my kitchen, I mean you get out of my kitchen. But again, we don't need you. So we only have the verb get here. Get out of my kitchen. But they are still complete sentences because we have a complete thought in that they make sense. Now, let's have a look at some sentence fragments. When I say because of an incident, there's something missing here. we don't have a complete thought. What goes after, before, or because of the incident? What do you mean by because of the incident? There's information missing. We don't have a complete thought here. So that one is incomplete. Or when I say looking forward to seeing you, well, looking forward to seeing you, we see that in some emails or letters, looking forward to seeing you, but it's still a sentence fragment because we've got a subject and a verb missing. We have I am missing. Looking forward to seeing you means I am looking forward to seeing you. So looking forward to seeing you, you see it quite often in informal context. So not formal. Informal, the opposite of formal. Like, two friends and type of things. But if you want to be more formal, like sending an email to a manager or someone you don't know, you'll probably be writing, I am looking forward to seeing you, rather than looking forward to seeing you. In formal language, you tend to use complete sentences. In informal language, you could have some incomplete sentences. It does happen. Hope you are okay. For example, that is incomplete because I don't have the subject I should say informal. I hope you are okay. Informal, hope you are okay. Okay, that's informal. But in formal language, you tend to use complete sentences. Now I say complete sentences. But are the complete sentences simple, compound, or complex? Well, there can be any three of them. So what's the difference between simple, compound, and complex? A simple sentence is only made of one clause. Just one clause. That's it. But that's a simple sentence. That clause, we define it as a main clause or independent clause. Independent clause, main clause, they mean the same. They are independent clause because they make sense on their own. They don't need anything else to make sense. So simple sentence, just one independent clause or main clause. For example, the whole family went to the cinema at the town center by the supermarket. Quite a long sentence, but still a simple one. Why is it still a simple one? Because I've got only one subject and one verb. So if I ask the question, who went to the cinema at the town center by the supermarket? The answer is the whole family. So the whole family is the subject, went is the verb. And that's it. The whole family, subject, went, verb. We don't have any other subject or verb in that sentence. So we've got only one clause. One clause, one sentence, a simple sentence. Which makes sense on its own? It is all complete. The most astounding show arrived in town yesterday. Right, question. What arrived in town yesterday? Answer. The most astounding show. The most astounding show is then our subject. Arrived is our verb. And that's it. We've got only that subject and that verb, no other subject or verbs. So we've got one simple sentence again, one clause. So that's a simple sentence. Compound sentence, we need a little bit more. A compound sentence is made of at least two main clauses or independent clauses. Remember main clause? Independent clause is like a simple sentence. So if you want two simple sentences linked together will give you a compound sentence. However, when I say linked together, it's not any types of links. It's got to be linked by a coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunction. Now that's important. That's a big difference between the compound sentence and the subordinating one. Coordinating conjunctions, there are only 7 of them. So that's simple. 7 coordinating conjunctions. And one way to remember them is that mnemonic fanboys. F-A-N-B-O-Y-S. Each letter stands for a conjunction. For, and, no, but, or, yet, so. Fanboys. So the structure of a compound sentence is independent clause followed by a fanboys conjunction, a coordinating conjunction, followed by another independent clause. The most common coordinating conjunctions you will be using are and, but, or, and so. These 4 are the most common. The others are not that common. And the one that is very, very, very rarely used as a conjunction and specified as a conjunction is for. For, F-O-R, is mostly used as a preposition rather than as a conjunction. Because for FOR as a conjunction means because. For FOR as a preposition has a different meaning. What do I mean by preposition? Well, a preposition introduces a noun phrase. And again, what do I mean by a noun phrase? Okay. A phrase that has a noun as a main word. A noun phrase has a noun as a main word. For example, change is part of a living language. In change is part of a living language, I've got the noun language. What goes with language is living and a living language. A living language all form part of the same phrase. A living describing language. Language being a noun. I've got of just before. Of here introduces my noun phrase. A living language. So of here is my preposition. I said noun, but a noun phrase could be made of a pronoun. And a pronoun are words replacing nouns. That's why your pronoun could be in a noun phrase, because they replace nouns. Instead of writing the car is being serviced, the car will be ready in an hour. You can write the car is being serviced. It will be ready in an hour. You don't have to repeat the car again. So it here replaces the car being a noun. So it here is a pronoun. It may be easier for you to remember the most typical prepositions to understand what they are. And the most typical prepositions are at, to, under, above, by, on, in, into, out, or out of. These are the most common prepositions. The most common pronouns are I, mine, you, yours, he, his, she, hers, it, its, we, ours, they, theirs. These are the most common pronouns. For example, I bought these flowers for you. You is my pronoun, and at the same time a noun phrase that has been introduced by the preposition for you. Compared to, I bought these beautiful flowers for they are lovely. Now in for they are lovely, I've got a clause here. I've got the clause they are lovely because I've got a subject they and the verb are. They are lovely. So here, I don't have a noun phrase. I've got a full clause. For they are lovely. And here for means because. I bought these beautiful flowers because they are lovely. So for here is a conjunction. You got that structure. I bought these beautiful flowers, first clause, followed by the conjunction for, followed by they are lovely, another clause. So I bought these beautiful flowers for they are lovely is a compound sentence. I've got two clauses with my coordinated conjunction in the middle. And I bought these beautiful flowers for you. But for here in for you is not a conjunction, it is a preposition. So I bought these beautiful flowers for you is a simple sentence. Compound sentences could also have the following structure. An independent clause followed by another independent clause. For example, the weather is lovely today. Semicolon, it is beautiful and warm. Two simple sentences, side by side, but it's not really a simple sentence side by side because my capital letter is with the of weather and my full stop is after warm. So the full sentence is the weather is lovely today, it is beautiful and warm with a semicolon in between. So I've got two clauses here, two main clauses, two independent clauses. So that's a compound sentence. Now, let's have a look at a complex sentence. What are complex sentences? A complex sentence has a main clause or independent clause. They are the same, main, independent. So a main clause and a subordinating clause. Now, what's a subordinating clause? A subordinating clause is one that depends on the main clause. A subordinating clause cannot stand on its own. It does not make sense on its own. For example, whether he likes it or not. Well, whether he likes it or not, on its own, doesn't make sense. I mean, I've got information missing. There is something missing for that clause to make sense. Which is cheaper than the one out of town? What if I say which is cheaper than the one out of town? Again, That's a fragment. I mean, there's still information missing. It doesn't make sense on its own. What do you mean? Or thinking that it may rain later. Again, I've got some information missing. These three clauses, whether he likes it or not, which is cheaper than the one out of town, or thinking that it may rain later, all three of them, they've got information missing for them to make sense. They cannot stand on their own. For them to make sense on their own, well, they cannot. Because they are subordinated clauses. They can only make sense when they are supported by another clause, the main clause. For example, I will take the dog to the vet, whether he likes it or not. So when I say I will take the dog to the vet, whether he likes it or not, I've got a complete sentence here. It makes sense. I'll take the dog to the vet needs to be there for whether he likes it or not to make sense. I'll take the dog to the vet is fine. I mean, it makes sense on its own. I don't really need to have the rest, really. So that is the main clause, or the independent clause. Whereas what follows, whether he likes it or not, is the subordinating clause. Let's go to the local cinema, which is cheaper than the one out of town. Again, let's go to the local cinema, makes which is cheaper than the one out of town more meaningful. The whole thing there makes sense with let's go to the local cinema. Without let's go to the local cinema, my which is cheaper than the one out of town doesn't make sense. Now, let's go to the local cinema can make sense on its own. I could just stop there. Because that's in the main clause. That's the independent clause. Whereas, which is cheaper than the one out of town cannot make sense on its own, so it is the subordinate. Now with my last one. Alicia took her umbrella, thinking that may rain later. Again, with Alicia took her umbrella, my subordinating clause now works, thinking that may rain later. The full sentence makes sense with Alicia took her umbrella. But again, Alicia took her umbrella is the main clause because it stands on its own. I don't really need to have the rest. But with thinking that may rain later, it doesn't stand on its own, so that one is a subordinating conjunction. So my three examples here, my three sentences, they are all examples of complex sentence. They are complex sentences because I've got my main clause and a subordinating clause. The structure then is main clause followed by subordinate clause, and sometimes it is a subordinate clause followed by the main clause. For example, whether he likes it or not, I'll take the dog to the vet. Now, usually a complex sentence could start with a subordinate clause and then followed by a main clause, when the subordinating clause is introduced by a subordinating conjunction. A subordinating conjunction starts the subordinate clause, as simple as that. But compared to coordinating conjunctions, we've got more than 7 subordinating conjunctions. There are many of them. I cannot give you a full list because there are many. Some examples could be when, if, where, because, in that, and so on and so on and so on and so on. If you're not sure if a conjunction is subordinating or coordinating, well, the simple trick is it a fine voice or not? Remember fine voice from our coordinating conjunctions? If the conjunction is a fine voice, so for and nor and so on, then it is coordinating. If it is not a fine voice, then it's not coordinating. It will be, by elimination, a subordinating conjunction. Another example, we had which. And which is what we call a relative pronoun. It is placed just after the word, it gives more information. The relative pronoun is linked with the preceding word. For this reason, it has to stay there. It cannot be moved. Otherwise, the link is lost. So I say which is a relative pronoun. Others are who, that, whom, or whose. In Alicia took her umbrella, thinking that it may rain later, we actually have 3 clauses. Don't know if you realize that, but we've got 3 clauses. Why do I say we've got 3 clauses? It's because we've got 3 verbs. We've got took, thinking, and 𝙀𝙜𝙜𝙜 are the three verbs. We've got the main clause, Alicia took umbrella. We've got two subordinated clauses. The first one is thinking, that in 𝙀𝙜𝙜 letter, the full thing, thinking that 𝙀𝙜𝙜 letter. And the second one is that 𝙀𝙜𝙜 letter, so without thinking. A sentence could then have more than one subordinate clause. The sentence could be more complicated by adding more subordinate clauses as well as more main clauses. And that's the thing. You could add more main clauses. So a sentence could have two main clauses followed by subordinating clauses, which would make, if you think about it, both compound and complex. A sentence can be both compound and complex. For example, the whole party went walking, but some of them came back quite quickly because they were already tired. Now, in that full sentence, in that long sentence, we've got three verbs. Went, came, were. That gives you an indication of where the clauses are. The whole party went walking is my main clause because it can stand on its own. I can just say the whole party went walking. I could also say some of them came back quite quickly. Some of them come back quite quickly makes sense on its own. These two are main clauses linked by a coordinating conjunction but. So a main clause followed by a coordinating conjunction followed by another main clause is a compound sentence. But then if you add on top of that compound sentence a subordinating clause, because I've got because they're already tired, because the subordinating conjunction, because they were already tired cannot stand on its own. So because they were already tired is a subordinating clause. So I've got two main clauses followed by a subordinate clause. So I've got a compound and complex sentence here. To recap very quickly, a sentence starts with capital letter and ends with either a full stop, exclamation mark, or question mark. Within a sentence, you could have one clause or more clauses. A clause has a subject and a verb. Sometimes the subject is employed. So just look at the verb. If you have a verb, you probably have one clause. If you have two verbs, you probably have two clauses. We've got different types of sentences. Simple, compound, complex. A simple sentence only has one clause. A compound sentence has a main clause, followed by a coordinating conjunction, followed by another main clause. Or a main clause followed by a main clause. Usually a semicolon between. A complex sentence has the following structure. It's got a main clause followed by a subordinating clause. And remember, a subordinate clause cannot stand on its own. It's got to have a main clause for the full sentence to make sense. And remember, a sentence could be both compound and complex.